Okay, police-sponsored gun buybacks. A 2019 Los Angeles buyback collected over 1,000 firearms, but local reports estimated only a small percentage were even potentially crime-related based on preliminary police checks. Based on some studies and reports, as few as 1 to maybe 5% of guns collected at U.S. police gun buyback programs are typically possibly maybe linked to criminal activity, with some variation by location and program. In rare cases, this might be as much as 10% in very, very, very high crime areas, but higher figures are not well documented. More recently, findings in 2021, there was a working paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research, or the NBER, and it was authored by Toshio Ferzares, Joseph Sabia, and Mark Anderson. It's credible evidence that gun buybacks may increase gun crime in the areas where the gun buyback was conducted. And the study also confirms that gun buybacks do not reduce suicides, do not reduce homicides, which is consistent with other research. And it also argued that resources spent on buybacks are often completely wasted. So that is your gun truth of the week. So, Dakota, gun buybacks. What are your thoughts on gun buybacks?
That's an interesting question because I do have some thoughts.
Lay it on me.
I think in general, guns that are taken to gun buybacks are guns that would have never been used in a crime and are generally law-abiding citizens who maybe inherited a gun and don't want it, or have never shot before and don't know how to use it, or they, their husband passed away and they just got all these guns that they don't want. But those guns were never going to get in the hands of a gangbanger, right? So I think in general, all of the media around gun buybacks being this great thing for society and it's making our community safer, that's not true. I don't think. I think there's a very small percentage, like that study said, of guns that, maybe your, brother committed a crime with this gun and now it's at your house. And so you're going to go turn it in because you're like, I don't want this criminal gun in my house.
You're getting rid of evidence.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know if it's really so much that the criminals themselves are like, I don't want a free gun anymore. That's probably not how these guns are getting bought back.
There's so many little problems with what's going on with gun buybacks.
Yes.
It's starting with the name. They're not buying it back because it wasn't theirs to begin with. You know what I mean? So this whole thing is just built on a foundation of propaganda.
Yes.
They're not stopping crime. They're not preventing crime. They're not preventing homicide or suicide like these actual studies, not the propaganda, biased organizations, not what they want you to believe, but the actual scientific surveys where they actually look into this. That being said, the propaganda part, the PR part's important, because they use these gun buybacks to let society know,
how dangerous guns are.
Which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
So that part I absolutely hate. But I had an interesting conversation with a high-ranking person in law enforcement here locally in San Diego, and I'm not gonna, it's not a big deal. They didn't give me secrets or anything like that, but. We were talking about gun buybacks, and he's actually a gun guy, a legit gun guy. He's a professional law enforcement, but he's an absolute gun enthusiast. And he was telling me, on the very rare occasion that a valuable firearm shows up, they absolutely try to educate him, like, hey, Mrs. So and so, I realized that your husband left this and he passed away or whatever. You could get money for this, and he says that without fail in all the years that he's done these gun buybacks, if people are there doing a gun buyback, their attitude is like, look, I just want to get rid of this. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go. I don't care if I'll go, I'll take the $100 gift certificate. I don't care about the gift certificate. Just take this out of my hands. For whatever reason, they have kind of this irrational or maybe it is rational, but they have this bias against owning the firearm. But he also said that 99.9% of the firearms that show up at these gun quote unquote buybacks are trash. They're absolute garbage. No one's using them. They're not effective. It's a pipe with something that looks like might have been a trigger kind of attached. They really aren't firearms. They really aren't doing anything. It's just for show.
Well, it's interesting because you said that most people just want to get rid of them once they're there.
Yeah.
And I think probably for a lot of people who aren't familiar with firearms and who don't want to own it, there is this piece of fear of like, well, I already did the emotionally difficult job of packing up this gun, putting it in my car, painstakingly, nervously shaking on my drive over to the police station. So no, I'm not going to elongate this negative experience for myself.
Right.
But I wonder if the initial step, if it was clear, if people knew, instead of going to a gun buyback, you could just walk into an FFL. Well, now they just do that painstaking drive to an FFL instead of the sheriff's department or the local PD or the whatever, and maybe they make more money for the gun. So I think some of it is a marketing thing. People just don't know what options are out there for them.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. And I got to tell you, right now, I'm in the middle of evaluating, the amount of political capital, the amount of time, that a volunteer or an FFL would spend. Is this an effective step of, combating these gun buybacks, or should we just educate on the front end? So like you said, rather than make that drive to a gun buyback, they make that drive to an FFL.
Right.
But none of those people are watching this show.
Right, exactly.
So you and I could educate, and we're just preaching to the choir. So I'm curious, if you're listening, if you're watching this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on gun buybacks and how, this show or an organization like San Diego County Gun Owners, what should we do? How should we combat it?
Yeah, I think one thing to remember here, because you're right, they're not listening to our show, the people who are going to sell a gun to a gun buyback. But if all they've ever seen is a flyer from the sheriff's department saying, $100 gift card for a long gun or $50 gift card for a handgun or whatever, right? If that's the only thing they've ever seen, they might have no idea that they could get 5 times that or 10 times that at the FFL. They just don't know. So I think a piece of it is, we can advertise these gun buybacks, like the sheriff's office or the local PD can advertise it, but they should, make it a little bit more clear, I think, that if you go to our gun buyback, the only benefit of that is that you don't have to show an ID and we're not going to ask you any questions. The only people that it benefits, honestly, are people who shouldn't have the gun or shouldn't be selling the gun or whatever, or couldn't sell the gun to an FFL.
They're getting rid of their evidence.
Exactly. So let's use it for what it's intended for, which is that. And everybody else who wants to sell a gun, let's funnel them into the FFL world. But the question, I guess, is how do we do that?
How do we reach out to that person?
And how important is it? And, all of those things. I don't know.
So anyway. All right. That's your gun truth. That's your discussion on gun buybacks. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media. And check out our website at gunownersradio.com.